This old, scratched state quarter looks like something you'd toss in a tip jar, but one of these actually sold for over $100,000, and most people have no idea what to look for. Some of the ugliest, dirtiest quarters in circulation right now could be hiding rare errors, tiny details, or unique features that turn 25 cents into a life-changing payday.
The 1788 to 1999 Georgia state quarter with a AP mint mark might look like just another worn-out coin sitting in your pocket, but don't let its ordinary appearance fool you. Some of these quarters, especially the ones people ignore because they're scratched, faded, or dirty, have sold for shocking amounts of money, and the difference between a common coin and a valuable one often comes down to tiny details most people never notice. At first glance, the Georgia quarter is easy to recognize. You'll see the iconic peach in the center, branches with leaves, and the outline of the state with the banner reading, "Wisdom, Justice, Moderation." It's a beautiful design, but because millions were made in 1999 at the Philadelphia Mint, most people assume they're all worth just 25 cents. That assumption is exactly why valuable ones keep slipping through people's hands every single day. Here's where things get interesting. Collectors have discovered that certain Georgia quarters from 1999 with the AP mint mark contain subtle errors and variations that can dramatically increase their value. And the most exciting part? These aren't coins locked away in museums. These are coins that still show up in everyday change, often in rough, circulated condition. One of the biggest clues to look for is something called a struck-through grease error. Now, don't worry about the technical name, the idea is simple. During the minting process, grease or debris can get between the die and the coin, causing parts of the design to come out weak, faded, or even missing. On a Georgia quarter, this might show up as missing letters in a Georgia, a faint peach, or parts of the design that look oddly smooth or incomplete. To the average person, that might look like damage. But to a collector, that's a red flag, in a good way. Coins with strong struck-through errors have been known to sell anywhere from a few $100s to several thousand, depending on how dramatic the missing details are. And yes, even coins that look ugly or worn can still carry that hidden value if the error is clear enough. Another thing you want to check is doubling. This is when parts of the design appear slightly duplicated, almost like a shadow effect. On the Georgia quarter, pay close attention to the lettering, especially "In God We Trust" and "Liberty." If you notice the letters look thick, blurry, or doubled, you might be holding something special. Now here's the part most people completely overlook. Even without major errors, high-grade versions of this coin, especially ones that somehow avoided heavy wear, can still command impressive prices. A pristine 1999 Georgia quarter with a AP mint mark, graded in near-perfect condition, has sold for thousands of dollars at auction. That's because collectors are always hunting for the best preserved examples, and finding one from circulation is extremely rare. But let's be real, you're not likely to find a perfect coin in your pocket change. What you are likely to find is something worn, scratched, maybe even discolored. And that's exactly why you shouldn't ignore it. Because sometimes, those damaged-looking coins are actually the ones hiding the most valuable errors. There have been cases where people nearly spent these coins at gas stations or grocery stores, only to later realize they had a rare variation worth hundreds, or even thousands, of dollars. The difference? They took a second look. So here's what you should do right now. Grab any 1999 Georgia quarters you have and check for 3 simple things. First, look for missing or faded details in the design, especially around the peach and lettering. Second, examine the text closely for any signs of doubling or unusual thickness. And third, check the overall appearance. If something looks off compared to a normal coin, don't ignore it. That one strange detail could be the reason your quarter is worth far more than 25 cents. And remember, the AP mint mark, located just to the right of Washington's ponytail on the front, tells you it was made in Philadelphia, where many of these collectible variations have been found. The truth is, coins like this slip through circulation every day because people assume they're worthless. They see scratches, dirt, or wear, and they move on. But collectors know better. They know that sometimes, the roughest-looking coins are the ones with the biggest secrets. First up, coin. The 2018 quarter with a AP mint mark might look even more ordinary than the Georgia coin, newer, shinier, and honestly, easier to ignore. Most people don't even think twice about quarters from recent years. They assume anything modern can't possibly be valuable. And that's exactly why some of the most surprising finds are still hiding in plain sight. Because here's the truth. Certain 2018 AP quarters have already shocked collectors with how much they can sell for, especially when they carry the right kind of flaw or unusual detail. First, you need to understand something simple. In 2018, the U.S. Mint released multiple designs as part of the America the Beautiful series. That means your 2018 quarter could feature different reverse designs depending on the state or park. But no matter which design you have, the real value comes down to what went wrong during the minting process. And yes, things did go wrong. One of the most exciting things to look for on a 2018 P quarter is a die chip or cut error. This happens when a small piece of the die breaks off, leaving behind a raised blob of metal on the coin. On some 2018 quarters, these show up as strange bumps on the design, sometimes near the rim, sometimes right in the middle of important features. To most people, it just looks like damage. But collectors see it differently. A strong die chip in a noticeable area can push the value of a 2018 quarter from face value to $50, $100, or even more depending on how dramatic and unique it is. And because these errors are random, no two coins are exactly the same, which makes them even more desirable. Now here's something that gets even more interesting. Some 2018 AP quarters have been found with what collectors call off-center strikes. That means the design isn't perfectly aligned, the image might be shifted, leaving part of the coin blank while the rest is crammed into one side. If you ever see a quarter where the design looks crooked or cut off, do not spend it. Those coins can be worth hundreds of dollars, especially if the date and mint mark are still visible. And yes, people have found these in everyday circulation. Another detail you should pay very close attention to is the edge of the coin. A normal quarter has a reeded edge, those small grooves running around the side. But occasionally, minting errors can cause missing or partial reeds, or even smooth sections where the grooves should be. These kinds of mistakes are rare, and when they show up on a modern coin like a 2018 AP quarter, collectors take notice immediately. Now let's talk about something most people completely overlook: proof-like surfaces. Even though 2018 AP quarters are meant for circulation, a small number of them come out with unusually sharp details and a mirror-like shine. If you find one that looks almost too perfect, like it doesn't belong in your change, it could be worth setting aside. Coins like that, especially if they've stayed in great condition, can sell for far more than you'd expect from a modern quarter. But here's the real secret. Condition still matters, but not in the way most people think. A scratched or dirty 2018 quarter might still be valuable if it has a clear, recognizable error. In fact, some of the best finds come from coins people almost threw away because they looked damaged. That's the pattern you're starting to see. The coins that look the worst sometimes turn out to be the best. So right now, if you have any 2018 quarters with a AP mint mark, take a closer look. Rotate it under the light. Check for bumps, shifts in the design, missing details, or anything that just doesn't look right. Because the smallest imperfection could be the exact thing that makes your coin valuable. Next coin. The 1790 to 2001 Rhode Island State Quarter with a AP mint mark is one of those coins people barely even notice. It's been passed from hand to hand for years, scratched up, faded, sometimes so worn you can hardly see the details anymore. Most people see the sailboat, the water, the word Ocean State, and they move on without a second thought. But that's a mistake. Because hidden among these ordinary-looking quarters are a few that have turned into serious money, and the wild part is, many of them don't look special at all. At first glance, the Rhode Island quarter has a calm, simple design. A sailboat gliding across the water, symbolizing the state's deep connection to the sea. But this design also created the perfect opportunity for certain minting mistakes to stand out, if you know where to look. One of the first things you want to check is the water lines beneath the sailboat. On a normal coin, those lines should look clean and consistent. But on some 2001 UPO Rhode Island quarters, collectors have found doubling in this exact area. Instead of crisp lines, you might notice a slight shadow effect, like the lines were stamped twice. It can look blurry or thicker than usual, almost like the water is vibrating. Most people would assume that's just wear and tear. But collectors know better. That kind of doubling, especially when it's clearly visible, can push the value of a simple quarter into the hundreds of dollars. And the stronger the effect, the more collectors are willing to pay. Now look a little closer at the sailboat itself. Pay attention to the mast, the sail edges, and the tiny details around the boat. Some coins have been found with die cracks running through this area, thin raised lines that weren't part of the original design. These cracks can look like scratches at first, but here's the key difference: they're raised, not carved into the coin. That means they happened during the minting process. And that makes them valuable. A well-placed die crack, especially one that runs through a noticeable part of the design like the sail or the rim, can turn a coin most people would ignore into something collectors actively hunt for. But here's where things get even more interesting. Some Rhode Island quarters have what's called a weak strike. This happens when the coin isn't struck with enough pressure, leaving parts of the design soft or incomplete. On this coin, that often shows up in the sail or the lettering. You might see parts of a Rhode Island or Ocean State that look faded or uneven. Again, most people think that's just a worn-out coin. But in reality, it could be a mint error hiding in plain sight. And depending on how noticeable it is, that imperfect a look can actually increase the coin's value significantly. Now don't forget to check the front of the coin too. Look closely at Washington's face and the words Liberty and In God We Trust. If you notice any doubling, unusual thickness in the letters, or areas where the design looks slightly off, that's another sign you could be holding something rare. Even small details matter. Because when it comes to coins like this, value isn't always about perfection, it's about uniqueness. And here's something most people completely miss. Even though millions of these quarters were made in Philadelphia, only a tiny fraction have these noticeable errors. That means every time you come across a Rhode Island quarter, you're basically holding a lottery ticket, but most people never bother to check. They spend it without looking. They toss it in a jar. Or worse, they ignore the very details that could have made it valuable. There have been real cases where collectors paid hundreds of dollars for Rhode Island quarters that looked rough, worn, and completely ordinary at first glance. The difference was simple: they had something just a little bit off. Next coin. The 1803 to 2002 Ohio State Quarter with a D mint mark might be one of the most overlooked coins in circulation. People see the astronaut, the outline of the state, the airplane, and they assume it's just another modern quarter with no real value. But here's where that assumption can cost you. Because some of these Ohio quarters, especially the ones that look a little off, a little worn, or even slightly damaged, have quietly sold for hundreds, even thousands of dollars, all because of small details most people never notice. Now take a closer look at the design. Ohio's quarter is unique. It features not just one, but two symbols of innovation, the early Wright brothers airplane and a modern astronaut. That combination of fine details actually made this coin more vulnerable to minting mistakes. And when those mistakes happen, they tend to stand out in very specific areas. Start with the astronaut. Look closely at the helmet and the outline of the figure. On some 2002 AD Ohio quarters, collectors have found doubling in these areas. The edges might look slightly duplicated, almost like a faint shadow around the design. It's subtle, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that tiny detail? It can mean the difference between 25 cents and a coin worth a few $100s. Now shift your focus to the airplane. The wings and body of the plane are thin and detailed, which makes them a prime spot for errors. Some coins show die cracks running through the plane, while others have weak or incomplete strikes that make parts of the aircraft look faded or uneven. Again, most people would assume that's just wear. But here's the truth, grail wear usually smooths things out evenly. Mint errors, on the other hand, create odd, inconsistent patterns. If something looks strange or out of place, that's your signal to stop and take a closer look. Now here's something that gets even more interesting. Some Ohio quarters have been found with off-center strikes. Just like we talked about before, this is when the coin wasn't perfectly aligned during minting. The design might be shifted to one side, leaving a blank crescent-shaped area on the edge. If you ever find one like that, do not spend it. Even a slightly off-center Ohio quarter can sell for hundreds of dollars, and more dramatic examples can go even higher. And yes, these have been found in everyday pocket change. Now check the lettering. Look at Ohio, birthplace of aviation pioneers, and In God We Trust. If you notice any letters that look thicker than normal, slightly doubled, or uneven, that's another potential sign of a valuable variation. These small details are exactly what collectors hunt for. But here's the part that surprises most people. Even coins that look scratched, dull, or discolored can still be valuable if they have a clear error. In fact, some collectors actually prefer coins where the error is easy to spot, even if the coin itself isn't in perfect condition. So that ugly quarter you almost ignored? It might be the one worth money. And don't forget about the ID mint mark. Located on the front of the coin, it tells you this quarter was made in Denver. While millions were produced, only a small number carry the kinds of noticeable errors that drive up value. That's why checking each coin individually matters so much. Next coin, the 1812 to 2002 Louisiana State Quarter with a AP mint mark is one of those coins people see all the time and never think twice about. It's been floating around in circulation for years, scratched, dull, maybe even stained, and most people assume it's just another ordinary quarter. But here's the part that stops people in their tracks. Some of these Louisiana quarters, yes, even the rough-looking ones, have sold for hundreds and in rare cases even thousands of dollars, all because of small, easy-to-miss details. Now take a good look at the design. You'll see a trumpet, musical notes, and the outline of the Louisiana Purchase territory. It's a tribute to the state's rich musical history, especially jazz. But all those fine details also created opportunities for minting errors, and that's exactly where the hidden value comes in. Start with the musical notes. These tiny details are one of the most important areas to inspect. On some 2002 P Louisiana quarters, collectors have discovered doubling in the notes. Instead of sharp, clean shapes, the notes may look slightly blurred or doubled, almost like there's a shadow behind them. It's subtle, but incredibly important. Because coins with clear doubling in noticeable areas like this can sell for serious money. And the stronger the doubling, the higher the value tends to go. Now move to the trumpet. Look closely at the edges and the inner details. Some coins have been found with die cracks running through the trumpet, appearing as thin raised lines that shouldn't be there. Others show weak strikes, where parts of the trumpet look faded or incomplete. To most people, that just looks like damage or wear. But collectors know that raised lines and unusual fading in specific areas often point to mint errors, not damage. And that's what makes them valuable. Now here's something that a lot of people completely miss. Check the lettering, especially Louisiana, Purchase, and In God We Trust. If any of the letters look thicker than normal, slightly duplicated, or uneven, you could be looking at another form of doubling. Even small distortions in the text can make a big difference in value. And here's where things get really interesting. Some Louisiana quarters have been found with off-center strikes or slight misalignments. The design might look shifted, or parts of the coin might seem a little off balance. If you ever see a coin where the design isn't sitting exactly where it should be, don't ignore it. That kind of mistake can turn a regular quarter into a collector's piece worth hundreds of dollars. Now let's talk about condition, because this is where most people get it wrong. They assume that if a coin is scratched, dirty, or worn down, it can't possibly be valuable. But in reality, some of the most valuable error coins look exactly like that. Because the value doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from being different. So that Louisiana quarter sitting in your change jar, the one you thought was too ugly to matter, might actually be the one hiding a rare detail. And remember, the EP mint mark tells you it was made in Philadelphia, where many of these collectible variations have been discovered over the years. The truth is, coins like this are still out there. They're mixed in with everyday change, waiting for someone to notice what everyone else missed. Most people won't take the time. But you just did. So before you spend your next Louisiana quarter, take a second look. Check the musical notes, the trumpet, the lettering, and the overall alignment. Because one small, unusual detail could be the reason that simple 25-cent coin is worth far more than you ever imagined. Goodbye, guys.